And then, Rob, if you'll start us off with the third step prayer, we'll get started from there.
You better believe it. Welcome, everybody. And the third step prayer, which is on page 63 of your big book. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
All right. Rob, thank you, sir. Okay, we are starting on page 19 today. There is a solution. And we are most of the way down. It's the last paragraph on page 19. We'll go ahead and go up one paragraph there. It's that we have concluded to publish. Rob?
Okay, you got it. We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with the drinking problem.
You know, this is kind of a blanket statement that could go at the very beginning of the introduction, at the very end of it. So it's just basically letting you know that there is a problem, and they recognize that as the first 100 or so see it, and they will bring to the task our combined experience of those folks and the knowledge, and then suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. So basically just reassuring everybody that we've got a problem, I guess reassuring that we have a problem, but at the same time, knowing that there is a solution out there, and they're going to outline one. Rob?
Okay, we're on page 19, everybody. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints, and a respect for their opinions, are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend on our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs.
Right. So basically, they're going to touch on some things that are those discussions or those topics of discussions that you typically try not to have, because everybody's got a very strong opinion, or at least most have a strong opinion, and those opinions come out left and right. But nonetheless, they do at least admit that they're going to be bringing up some things. It's more of a precursor, and it's also more of a disclaimer, just to say, look, we understand that this is going to be controversial, that we but they are necessary to bring up, because as we describe the problem and the solution, a lot of the factors that are covered under medical, psychiatric, social, and religious are elements of both the problem and the solution. So that's kind of where we are at that point. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. And that's going to also mean that it encompasses a lot of things that that the individual drinker, the non-recovered person, is looking for in order to answer the question as to, is there any way I can stop drinking and stay stopped for good? So, Rob?
Yeah, I just want to throw in just what you had said, Leo, is that here's step 12 again. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help them meet their needs. So remember, it takes us out of ourselves, and we're thinking constantly of other people. So important, step 12. You may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do?
Yeah. And so they're setting the stage, getting you kind of primed, and I look at this as putting you at ease. The fact is, everybody has had this question: what do I have to do? What do I have to do to stop drinking? And because of that, they want to make sure that they kind of, this is that persuade through involvement. And as I've talked before in my 3 threes that I talk about, but this persuading through involvement is basically saying, hey, we've been there, we've asked the same question, and doubtless that you are asking the same question yourself. And that in and of itself is pretty much is a connection. That's what they're basically doing, is making a connection with the reader, so that the reader says, you know, they get it. I'm asking that same question, and not only that, but that question is something that's, you know, is a burning question, and I want to get an answer to it as soon as possible. And the other thing I would pay as another thing is that anytime they do ask a question in here, they always answer it. So they never leave anything to chance or leave anything vague in that regard. If they ask a question in this book, they answer it. So we'll be looking for the answer to that very question.
You mean they're not going to ask me my opinion, Leo?
No, not your opinion.
It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done before going into a detailed discussion, and may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. Such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. Their doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things here. Obviously, what do I have to do is a great lead in to saying that, yep, we get it. That is the purpose of this book, to answer such questions specifically. We've already covered that, so I just wanted to highlight that. I've got those that particular sentence highlighted and underlined. And they say that they're going to what they have done, and they're going to go into a detailed discussion of that. And there's plenty of a book for that. But at the same time, they're going to summarize some of the points. So here's kind of setting the stage. Everybody's heard at least one or more of these comments and or questions. And it essentially is that it is the ones that are not knowledgeable in what alcoholism is, and they don't understand it. And that's, this approach is going to be that people are looking at somebody else that's a drunk. I being one of those people that people used to look at and just roll their eyes. They would pull away from me. They would talk behind my back, and rightfully so. Here I am being kind of this belligerent, you know, drunk, saying things under my breath, trying to hide things. I was lying about stuff. I mean, no wonder people didn't want to associate with me. But nonetheless, there were some of these comments that were being made as well. And even my wife, until she understood it a little bit better, although I would have to say that my wife understood it better than most, if only because her father wrote a book on alcoholism when she was growing up. So she had the opportunity to be inculcated with alcoholism at an early age, and so there is some understanding there, which I have benefited from. Nonetheless, this is what we're getting into, and we are going to dispel some of these things that are being said. Obviously, his willpower must be weak. No, it's not anything to do with that. Then we're going to find out more as we go along. Rob?
Yeah, you know, these are all things that I question myself on. You know, I tried beer, I tried wine. You know, I did these things myself, you know, just trying to, so I wouldn't become, you know, overindulge. And, you know, because I didn't understand it myself. I didn't know I was suffering from an allergy. You know, I knew that once I started drinking that I was off to the races, but I didn't know why, you know? So, as I say, these are questions I asked myself too. Why couldn't I? Why don't I drink like a gentleman? You know, I thought AA, when I first came in, they would teach me how to drink like a gentleman so that I didn't have these problems. Little did I realize that abstinence was the only cure. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours.
Yeah, and that's we kind of know about ourselves. We don't necessarily at this point know about alcoholism. So we're kind of getting indoctrinated in it. But really what's happening here again is that we're persuading the reader through involvement, getting them kind of to start to think and say, I thought that, just like Rob said, I had that same experience. And so we're doing this is kind of their approach from the standpoint of being the step 12 from afar is this part of the book right now is sharing that information. And just like we said before, there is a lot of misunderstanding out there. It still is, and it will continue to be. So the more we get out to not only help the individual alcoholic, but also the people that are around them to understand better what alcoholism is, the better we're going to, or the better the chance of somebody recovering. All right, so we are going to get into the different kinds of drinkers now. And so let's go ahead and get started. And Rob, we'll just take one at a time as we go along.
You've got it. Oh, let me get, let this person in. Okay. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone.
Yeah, moderate drinkers, darn them. It's the kind of person that basically will drink, a good 2, 3, or 4 drinks at any given setting. They typically are the ones that will leave a little bit of the beer or wine in the bottom of their glass as they get ready to go to dinner, or they get ready to go home, or whatever. And they can drink excessively from time to time, but it's rare. And if they do, they basically can make a decision just then and there that they're not going to drink for a while. And this is certainly not describing me. And in fact, I looked back. I think that there was a point in time where I was, quote, a moderate drinker, in that I could stop for a period of time, and I would choose to stop for days at a time. Like maybe I was in school and needed to sober up or not drink, I guess, not as far as that goes, for a period of time while I was studying, or I was in a situation where it just wasn't the right thing to do, and I made the right decision not to drink. So but that's a little bit different than what I really the kind of drinker that I was, and that we'll get to discussing that here next.
Yeah, we're right at the bottom of page 20, everybody. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention.
Yeah, this is kind of the one that I remember most of myself when I was younger, and I was flying in aviation with the Marine Corps. And when we would deploy, if you deploy on a U.S. Navy ship, there's no alcohol allowed on the ship whatsoever. It's taboo. And so I was a rule follower, and unless I was in port and we were, in some, town or country that was on the edge of the water and stuff, I didn't drink. I didn't drink while I was on ship. When I was deployed in combat, there absolutely was no drinking. And I also was a rule follower then, and I went months without drinking. In fact, I've been able to just go for 7 months at a time without drinking. And then when I came back, it was a slow easing into it. And then it wasn't very long before I was back to what I would consider as this hard drinking kind of thing. But I could stop if I needed to for a period of time, depending on the situation or the environment I was in. This one's one that I relate to quite a bit with regard to my early years into my middle years of drinking in my life. Rob?
Yeah, when I think of the goes off to university for the first time in his life, and goes a little bit wild. But what happens is after his years at university, he comes home, or in Canada they usually come home for a little while. In the U.S. they usually move to some other state, and they get a job and they find a girl and they get married, they have kids and stuff, and they just change their whole life around. You know, where they were a hard drinker, now that change of environment, things have changed in their life, and they what we call grow up, or we think of as growing up. You know, that's when I think of the hard drinker in my mind.
Yeah.
But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of a drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink.
Yeah, so this is going to be a description here about a real alcoholic. It's the first time that real is used. Don't think anything of it. If you're alcoholic, it doesn't matter whether you're saying real alcoholic or just alcoholic. It's one and the same. You may have started off kind of in the early part of your life as a moderate drinker, and got to be the continuous hard drinker, and that certainly was me to a large extent. But at some point in time, my drinking began to take over. It got in the way of my job. It got in the way of my social life. It got in the way of my health, my well-being, my psychological well-being, etc. It just got in the way. And any time now that I even have the inkling that there was this thing called drinking in my life, certainly there is a small amount of remorse in that. I think most of it is that I just feel bad that I wasn't able to drink like other normal drinkers. But nonetheless, I quickly remember all of the things that went bad or wrong when I was drinking, and I quickly get to that solution again that I've got to let go of this thought and let my higher power enter in. And usually I will. I'm never that far away from a meeting, not unlike this, and or someone that I can reach out to, and quickly get myself back into in line and away from this the whole thought of drinking. But what a place to be, Rob.
Yeah, the real alcoholic lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. The allergy. That's what all these people have in common. But once they start to drink, they can't control the amount that they take. Here is the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. And I'm going to change he to I. Okay, just to turn it around a little bit. I do absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. I am a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I am seldom mildly intoxicated. I am always more or less insanely drunk. My disposition while drinking resembles my normal nature, but little. I may be one of the finest fellows in the world, but let me drink for a day, and I frequently become disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. I have a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. I am often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in that respect, I am incredibly dishonest and selfish. I often possess special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and have a promising career ahead of me. I use my gifts to build up a bright outlook for my family and myself, and then pull the structure down on my head by a senseless series of sprees. I'm the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated I ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early next morning, I search madly for a bottle I misplaced the night before. If I can afford it, I may have liquor concealed all over my house, to be certain no one gets my entire supply away from me to throw down the waste pipe. As matter grows worse, I begin to use a combination of high-power sedative and liquor to quiet my nerves so I can go to work. Then comes a day when I simply cannot make it and get drunk all over again. I go to a doctor who gives me morphine and some sedative, on which to taper off. Then I begin to appear at hospitals and sanitariums.
Yeah, what a bleak outlook.
I get depressed just reading it.
What's that?
I'm getting depressed just reading it.
I know. And if you get somebody that can sit down and honestly take a look at themselves and be able to describe even some of the things that Rob just described, you've definitely got somebody that's receptive to learning about a solution and recovering. The people that are the deniers, you might say something like that. You're disgusting when you drink. You're antisocial when you drink, and then there's this kind of rebellious kind of response. That person at that point in time just isn't ready. Unfortunately, they are alcoholic, but they're just not ready to be receptive to a solution to stop drinking. This incredibly dishonest and selfish is a big one here for me. The hiding the alcohol throughout the house. I used my garage, and it wasn't whether I could afford it or not. It was whether or not I could come up with enough little containers and hiding places to put it. The problem is then I forgot where I put it. And for at least 2 or 3 months after I stopped drinking, I would be out in the garage doing something, and there would be another little bottle, another reminder, and another test, if you will, in regards to whether or not I was going to drink or not. And I have to admit, at first 30 days or so, I relapsed a couple of times just because I found those darn bottles. I thought about it and didn't do the right thing. I was, but I did learn from it. I learned that this was the wrong thing to do, and it just reinforced it helped because it reinforced my recovery, but it didn't help because I literally was weak enough at the time. I still hadn't turned myself over completely to my higher power. I hadn't let that power enter in completely to my life, and that's where things happened. But nonetheless, it did take control, and alcohol was definitely woven into the very fabric of my whole existence. I would get up in the morning and start thinking about when I was going to be able to start drinking, where it was going to be, how I was going to get there, what I needed to accomplish in order to have, quote, a successful day before I drank, et cetera, et cetera. It was amazing at how much I negotiated with myself on getting to that point where I could drink. Rob?
Yeah, this reminds me of next Friday, Bill from New Jersey is doing Dr. Bob's Nightmare. And this reminds me so much of Dr. Bob's story. Dr. Bob for 17 years would take sedatives in the morning in order to steady his nerves so that he could go to work, make enough money so he could buy alcohol on the way home so he could get drunk. 17 years. I just consider that being like a hamster on the wheel, going around and around and around, because if Dr. Bob couldn't steady his nerves, he was a proctologist. So, he was operating sometimes, other times he was seeing a customer, but, he just tried to make enough money in order to buy enough alcohol to get him through the day, and try to keep his family going. It just, we lose an awful lot of people in alcoholism to suicide. And it's because they don't see any solution. And that's why it's important that, we bring this message to the newcomer. Because some of them don't see any way out. So remember, Dr. Bob, 17 years before he found a solution. 17 long years. Wow. We're on page 22, everybody. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description would identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle, with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters?
There you go. A number of other questions that you would ask yourself and people would ask about you. And you just forget. You forget that you forget, and the next thing you know, you're drinking again, and it's the baffling feature of alcoholism. Why is it that it's got that kind of control over us? Why is it that once it has a control over us, it does the things that it does, and why can't we stop? So, just best to really kind of internalize this whole section here that we're talking about and kind of get ready, because there's going to be a lot of good answers coming up in the next few pages. Rob?
Yeah, but you know what? This is such a depressing page. I got it. You know what? I just think of Dr. Bob and what he went through, and you know, and how we all go through pretty much the same thing, where we're doing the same thing day in and day out, you know, trying to make a living in order to get home and drink, you know, only to pass out and then do the same thing the next day.
You
Oh
know,
well.
Rob, it's what if you take it from a sales perspective, you come in and there's a person that you're talking to that they have a problem.
Yeah.
What you try to do is you try to make sure that you understand that problem, but it's a technique called widening the gap. And what you basically do is take where their problem is and what their solution is, and for a short period of time, you kind of widen that gap and make it look like that there's, you know, you've really got this problem that you need solved. And then what you do is you bridge that gap and pull it back together. And by doing so, you win over that person and become a partner in their business, because basically what you've done is really identified and isolated their problem, gotten them to the point that they really believe in their problem and believe that that there's got to be a solution. And if there is a solution, they're going to take it, and then you provide them with that solution. So in this case, what's happening here is that they're essentially getting you kind of in a depressed state. You're kind of like, man, this is a problem. This really is a problem. Oh my gosh, they're hitting it right on the head, you know, that kind of thing. And then boom, they're going to come in with the solution. And at that point, you're going to be hungry for that solution and you're going to go after it. So it's really trying to create that, you know, that kind of interest that becomes a very strong desire, and ultimately you go after it. So there's a sales technique going on here.
Yep. Well, you know what? I'm being sold on it. Because you know, why does he take that one drink? So now they start to get into the malady. Why do we take that first drink when we know what's going to happen? Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We're not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle.
So there is going to be a little bit of question out there. The fact is, I think there is more scientific studies that have been done, and I think they understand it a little bit better. But bottom line is that it is just a problem that some people have, and like us, we take a drink, it triggers the allergy. Next thing you know, we are off to the races. And it's hard to describe what that is, why that is, and what got you there. But we do know that the malady is what gets you to that first drink, and the allergy is what keeps you there after the fact. And both are bad with regard to the alcoholic. Rob?
We know that while the alcohol keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We're equally positive that once he takes any alcoholic whatever into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about this as far as the allergy and the malady is concerned, but those are the two conditions of the alcoholic, and we're basically just starting to describe them in more detail here as we go forward. Rob?
Top of page 23, everybody. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk.
Yeah, this denial with regard to that at the end here, but I think it's really important to kind of show that this is how absurd it looks and seems to other people with regard to the alcoholic. And one thing that we would point out, and this defines in part an alcoholic, and that is as if somebody can stay away from alcohol to begin with altogether without any issue or challenge, they're not alcoholic. This is not that's not the person we're talking to. Now, they do say if you never take that first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion, you don't have this problem. Well, of course, but here's the deal. Once you take that first drink and you find that you cannot stop, you have got a problem. And you're going to try to give it any kind of excuse that you can. You know, we find good and bad excuses to drink as alcoholics. It's like any reason whatsoever that's, you know, real or absurd, that good or bad, big or small, we're going to find it and we're going to use it as an excuse to drink. And we're going to say that to somebody. I'm drinking because I'm celebrating. I'm drinking because I'm I had a bad day at work or something like that. And that is just the person really making excuses for themselves, and they're bad all the way around. No matter what, they're bad. Bottom line is that you know, this becoming irritated and refusing to talk is that person that's in denial and is pushing back, and that person is probably not ready. And the best thing you can do as a sidebar here with somebody like that is just make yourself available for whenever they possibly could become ready to talk. And once they are, then you jump in with both feet. Rob?
Yeah, it says right here, you know, if our friend never took the first drink, they wouldn't set this terrible cycle in motion. So easy peasy. Don't take that first drink. Not that easy, is it? We have something that says our brain, as our friend Bill from New Jersey always says, our brain wants its candy and will tell us anything in order for us to do it. And I always like how Art always says, he makes it so simple. The melody's job is to get you to take that first drink. Once you've taken that first drink, the melody has done its job. It goes back to sleep or wherever it goes, and the allergy takes over and we can't control the amounts. It's simple, easy to understand. Okay. Why don't we just not take that first drink? Because the brain keeps telling you it'll be different this time. It's going to be okay. You deserve it, you know? And as it says in the book, we come up with 1,001 excuses for why we do it. None of them make sense with the havoc that it causes in our life. You know, I've told my wife I'm never going to do it again. Honey, don't worry about it. I've got it under control. Only in the next 24 hours to just break her heart and break my own heart too, because I don't know why I'm doing it. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they're down for the count.
Yeah. So once in a while, he may tell you the truth and just basically say, I have no idea why I'm drinking. That certainly was me. Even if I was trying to be honest with only myself, I would sit there in my own mind and go, why the heck am I drinking so much? Why is it that I can't stop after 1, 2, or 3 drinks? Why is it that I have to drink everything in my glass? And why is it that when I get up and my wife left something in her glass, I'm thinking I should finish that? I mean, those are the things that would baffle me, and it would make me crazy as to why that is. And I couldn't answer it. To be honest, if I was being honest with anybody and anybody asked me why I did it, I would have to say I have no idea. And I'm truly one of these folks. But once this malady, this inability to stay away from that first drink has a real hold, you are baffled. You can't, it's why can't I? But I like this next part, and that is that this is the first obsession that they describe in the book. It's not a symptom, it's not malady, and it's not the malady, and it's not the allergy, but it is the obsession that somehow someday they will beat the game. In other words, that they will stop drinking and stay stopped under their own self-will and their own power. And that is one of 2 obsessions. And we'll talk about the second one later, but just as an aside, it is the ability to drink like other normal drinkers. And why can't you be able to do that? So 2 different kinds of obsession. One is stopping and stay stopped under your own willpower. And the second one is to how do you drink like other people, normal drinkers, and not an alcoholic. So they often suspect that they are down for the count. I swore to myself there was no way I was going to be able to stop drinking. It was going to be my undoing. It was going to be my demise. I was going down for the count. I really believe that. And that works against you in the beginning when you're trying to stop drinking, because you have that little voice in your head kind of going, you're not going to be able to stop. You haven't been able to stop before. Why is it going to work this time, kind of thing. So you're doubting yourself, second guessing, and that type of thing. It is one of the things that you have to stop struggling with. And that's what I called it. I struggled with those kind of comments and those thoughts that I was having at the time when I was trying to stop to begin with. But nonetheless, I got there. Thank goodness.
Thank God.
We got there. Rob?
Yeah, this one thing that you said, Leo, is that normal drinkers against alcoholics is think about going to a wedding, and the waiter comes around and he starts topping up, people's wine. The normal drinker will just, leave the drink there and they'll top up the wine. The alcoholic will say to the waiter, "Wait a minute, let me finish this first," so that they can get a full glass of wine.
Yep.
It's a little bit different. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will.
Yeah, and that is to stay stopped. And again, we know, and we'll find out more about this, but your own willpower is not going to get you there. You're just not going to be able to do it. Otherwise, you would have done it already. This isn't as easy as you might think it is, but it isn't so difficult that you can't achieve it. It does take some work, but we can get there. But there are those people that are looking at the alcoholic and wondering and waiting for that person to finally wake up and stop drinking. Rob?
But we know what willpower will do for us. Nothing.
Nothing.
The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcohol, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. The tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected.
Yeah, I was down for the count long before I recognized it. And then once I recognized it, it was a long time before I would actually admit to it. And it was a long time that after I admit to it, that I finally said enough was enough and I got it. I have to do something. So it does show up well before the alcoholic is ready to stop drinking. But there is the most powerful desire to stop. You know, we talk about the pounding on of the bar, a table. You know, the wincing, the looking in a mirror. I mean, you go to the bathroom and you look in the mirror and you say to yourself, "What the heck are you doing, Leo?" And you're holding yourself up at the sink. I mean, it is just not a good place to be. No control whatsoever. No control whatsoever. Rob?
Yeah. Leo, do you want me to go to the next
Let's go
paragraph,
ahead
or do you
and
want to
stop
bring
there
Bill
at
in?
the italics. We'll start off with that next time. And
Okay.
let's just open it up to Bill.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys. Good job today. This is a real good chapter here. And what Bill's doing here, he's giving us some indication of what alcoholism is. He's trying to give us like a description of what's wrong with us and what happens to us. And he comes up with all different things. On page 20, he told us our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend on our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Like Rob pointed out, that's step 12. He's got step 12 snuck in all throughout this book. And also on page 20, it asks the question, what do I have to do? And it tells us that's the purpose of this book, to answer those questions. And the answer is, we shall tell you what we have done. In other words, we're not supposed to tell people what to do. We're supposed to tell them what we did, what the first 100 did, the course of action that we followed. So if they want what we have, they can follow along with the same thing. Because when you tell an alcoholic what to do, most of the time they'll do the opposite, because we're very, very defiant people. And he talks about on page 21, the real alcoholic. And all real it's just used for emphasis. Bill likes to use words for emphasis all throughout the book. He qualifies his statements by using these little words. Like when he says defeat, he says complete defeat. When he says honesty, he says rigorous honesty. When he talks about work, he says strenuous work. This is just Phil's way of emphasizing different words. So he's just calling it a real alcoholic. That's just an alcoholic. It doesn't mean anything special. Phil's just trying to emphasize the point. That's all. And what he's calling the real alcoholic, he says, we lose all control of our drinking consumption once we start to drink. That's talking about the physical part, the allergy. That's what really defines us as an alcoholic. And in the doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth said that's the one symptom that we all have in common. No matter how many symptoms you have or whatever, if you really are an alcoholic, when you take a drink, you are going to get thirstier. That's what alcohol does to us. It has that physical effect on us, and it doesn't have that effect on anybody else that's not an alcoholic. And then the book starts to get into the mental part a little bit. It's starting to ask this question, why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experience show him that one drink means another debacle with all the attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Now he's starting to touch on the mental part. That something in our brain malfunctions, our brain short circuits. I like to call it my brain wants its candy. And when my brain wants its candy, it makes me pick up a drink against my will. And that's basically what's going on. Something in our mind is not working exactly like a social drinker or a moderate drinker. And any other, these people that are not alcoholics, they can say no whenever they want to. For some reason, something in our brain makes us drink against our will. Like Rob mentioned, we'll be pounding on the bar saying, how did I get started again? That's what happens to us. And well, what Bill's doing, again, he's giving us like a basic description here of what an alcoholic is so that we can see ourselves. This is done so we can see the problem, so we can identify with being an alcoholic. Because most alcoholics, at least in the beginning, we don't believe we're alcoholics. we think that we're just going through a phase, or it's not my fault, it's everybody else's fault. All those excuses and things and rationalizations that we come up with. And Bill's just trying to lay it out here so we can read through this and say, yeah, you know what? I kind of do that too. Maybe I am one of them. Maybe I should keep reading this book and go through this course of action and see if it'll help me. That's pretty much all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share, guys.
Thanks very much, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And Bill does have a big book study that he has on Friday mornings, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And it is quite good, very, very much in the historical perspective of things, which really brings the book alive. All right, Rob, let's go ahead and close with the Serenity Prayer, and then we'll take it from there.
You got it. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.